Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. So today we're going to be talking about this beauty right here. This is the TTartisan 500mm f6.3 super telephoto lens, and I made a written review about this lens a couple months ago on my blog, and that blog post is blowing up. Everybody wants to read about this lens. So for those of you who already checked out the blog, thank you. This is now going to be the video review of that blog. So yeah, let's talk about this lens and what makes it so awesome. All right, so here are the topics for the video. If you want to skip ahead, go ahead and skip ahead, but I would strongly recommend watching the whole video just so you don't miss anything. And another thing I gotta mention is this is a sponsored video. TTartisans did send me this lens for review. They don't get to watch this video or tell me what to say in this video. Opinions are 100% my own. And as always, I'm trying to create a review that's honest and truthful. I'm not trying to sell you anything or push anything to you. This is gonna be a 100% honest review. And at the end, if you do want to buy a lens, there will be affiliate links down below in the description. So if you want to help out the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So with that being said, let's start with the first topic. All right, so let's start off with the specs here. So first things first, price, $369 USD, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, if you're thinking about 500 millimeters of range for $369, it's a steal of a deal. And the thing that separates this lens from other budget super telephoto lenses is this one is actually sharp. All right, so more specs. Release date 2023, format for full frame, but you can mount this onto APS-C depending on the mount, or you can use adapters to mount it onto Micro Four Thirds or whatever. So it's pretty versatile. And in terms of the mounts, you can buy this lens in a variety of mounts for a bunch of different camera systems. So that is awesome. Front filter thread, 82mm, aperture blades, 12. Now, let's talk about that for a second. 12 aperture blades is absolutely amazing. That means the background is going to be nice and smooth. So the more blades you have, the better, softer bokeh you can get. So 12 aperture blades, TTartisans, that is awesome. Aperture range f6.3 to f32, which is good. I mean, it's not a low light beast. You're not gonna be shooting an ultra low light f2.8 style, but to get a 500mm at f2.8, like, we're gonna be talking about a massive lens. So 6.3, absolutely fantastic for this focal range. Minimum focus distance, 3.3 meters, which is par for the course for a super telephoto. Weight, 1,617 grams. Optical design, 8 elements in 5 groups. Weather sealing, no. So if you're shooting birds in the rain or landscapes in the rain, bring a garbage bag to throw over the lens, or a lens sleeve, some kind of lens cover, that kind of thing, to protect it from the elements. That would be a smart thing to do. Lens IS, no. I mean, you're not gonna find image stabilization in a lens at this price point, never. And APS-C conversion is about 800mm. So if you have like an R7, for example, and you pop this lens on the front, you're gonna get an 800mm focal length, which is absolutely nuts. So yeah, those are the specs. All right, design and build quality. And I mean, just look at this lens. Just take a look at it. This is a beautiful lens. It looks great. So first thing I'll talk about is the design. TTartisans did a great job designing this lens. It is like matte black all the way through, very minimal in terms of the information on the lens, just what you need. There aren't any weird like rubber bits or pieces or weird design elements to distract. It's just a nice, simple looking lens, and it is gorgeous. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, this lens is all metal. Everything is metal except for obviously the lens cap, but the mount is metal, which is great. You definitely don't want a plastic mount on a lens like this, but yeah, complete metal construction, including a metal lens cap. Now, I watched some older review videos of this lens, and the lens cap was a screw-on lens cap, but now it's just a pull-off lens cap. Some reviewers were complaining about that. So it's nice to see that TTartisans is listening to its customers and making adjustments as they go. So that is awesome. Now, when it comes to the focus ring and aperture ring, those are also metal, which is really unique. I've never seen anything like that on a lens before. And the aperture ring is declicked, and the focus ring is really tough to turn. It is really well dampened. So you have to put some real effort into turning that, which is nice. I think on a lens like this, that is absolutely perfect. Once you lock in your focus, it's not easy to accidentally move or budge or anything like that. So once you lock in your focus, you're locked in, and that is great. So yeah, awesome. This lens also comes with a tripod collar, which is really nice. And you notice I have some tape on there. I will talk about why that tape is on there in the special features section, but for those of you who read the written review, you already know why it's there. All right. And another nice design feature on this lens is a metal lens hood. So that metal lens hood is an 82mm lens hood, and it just screws onto the front of the lens. But you can also screw this lens hood onto other lenses. So here I have the Canon RF 85mm f1.2L. It's got an 82mm filter thread, and I can screw this lens hood onto that lens and use it with that lens. So that's kind of cool, I guess, unintentional use. When it comes to filters, you can screw filters onto the front of the lens hood, which is great. It's got 82mm filter threads on the front, and it's also got 82mm filter threads on the back. So you can screw filters on behind the lens hood as well. So that's kind of cool. So if you want to stack a bunch of filters, you can stack a bunch of filters and then put the lens hood on there. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, design and build quality, super happy with this lens. I think it looks absolutely fantastic and performs well too, as we'll talk about later in this video. All right, let's talk about menu settings. So if we take off the rear lens cap, you notice there are no electrical contacts on the mount, meaning that when you mount this onto your camera may not recognize that there's a lens mounted to it. So depending on the brand, I hear with Sony, you don't have to change the setting, but I don't shoot Sony, so I can't confirm that. I can tell you with Canon, there's a setting in the menu called, more info about it right there if you want to check it out, but there's a menu setting called release shutter without lens. You have to turn that on in order for the camera to release the shutter with what is a lens that it doesn't recognize on the front. And this is something you have to do with vintage lenses as well. So yeah, video about it there if you want to know more. All right, so let's talk about special features. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is a feature missing on this lens, and that is weather sealing. It would have been nice if this was weather sealed, and I don't think it would have added too much to the cost, especially here on the bayonet mount. I mean, a lot of people, you're out there, you're using this lens outdoors, right? You're shooting birds, landscapes, things like that. Sometimes you get caught in the rain, and it sucks to have a lens that isn't weather sealed. Like the rest of the lens, there's no electronics in there, so if a little bit of water gets in, it'll evaporate. Not a big deal, but at the end, it would have been nice if this was weather sealed so that you don't have to worry about water running down your lens and into the camera. So hopefully on future versions, we get some weather sealing. And speaking of future versions, let's talk about this. Okay, so tripod collar. When I did my research on this lens, I found that the older version of this lens did not have the Arca Swiss mount on the bottom of the tripod collar. So it's great to see that TTartisan is listening to its customers and adapting the lens design. So that's awesome, glad to see that. Now, the one issue I had with this is that the Arca Swiss plate here is just too small for both my Arca Swiss mounts. So I put the lens in, I tightened it up, I was getting ready to shoot. You know, I lifted the lens up and it slipped right off. Thank God I caught it. That could have been bad. So yeah, to avoid that situation, definitely check to make sure that the Arca Swiss mount on here fits on your Arca Swiss plate. Now, in my testing, I find that this machining is just about 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters too small. If it was a little bit wider, it would definitely fit on all the Arca Swiss mounts. So I put a little bit of tape on here, 2 layers of tape on this side, 2 layers of tape on this side, and that extra thickness just allowed the Arca Swiss mount to grip and it sits solidly on there. So, I mean, obviously I'm using blue tape here. I would suggest using black tape so it's not so obvious. But in any case, I just wanted to warn you guys, TTartisans, hopefully you can machine this tripod collar a little better next time so it's a little wider and fits in the Arca Swiss mount. And if you have this version of the lens, use a little bit of tape to save yourself from crying, because if this lens falls and your camera's on there, there will be tears. All right, another thing that falls under special features, and this is kind of crazy, is the fact that the aperture ring is completely declipped. And that's very strange. That's a feature you only see on cinema lenses, not photography lenses. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. If you're a videographer and you find yourself in need of a 500mm cinema lens, I'm not saying, but I'm saying, you know, you might be able to use this thing. All right, so while we're talking about special features, this lens is also missing a really cool feature, and that is Lens IS. And of course, at this price point, you're never gonna find image stabilization in a lens. So you're gonna have to rely on your IBIS and technique in order to get sharp shots, because it's very easy to get blurry shots with a lens at this focal length. So let me give you some pro tips. Number 1, jump into your camera menu setting and manually set your IBIS, your IBIS to 500mm. The thing is, as we talked about earlier, this lens doesn't have any electronic contacts. So when you pop it onto your camera doesn't really know what the focal length is, and it'll go to some like default or something. Who knows, it might be at 50 millimeters. So go in there and definitely set your IBIS to 500 millimeters so that you get the proper stabilization for this focal length. That's number one. All right, tip number two is your shutter speed should be double your focal length. So this is a 500 schmilli, meaning that your minimum shutter speed should be 1,000th of a second. So go and set your shutter speed to 1,000th of a second. Third tip is set your shutter to electronic shutter. A mechanical shutter goes clank, clank, and it kind of shakes the camera a little bit. So I would definitely recommend going to electronic shutter so that there's absolutely no shake in the camera whatsoever. And number four is use a tripod or monopod to minimize shake, because, you know, a little bit 1 millimeter shake on your end, and if you're shooting at a great distance, it's like a couple meters of shake on the other end, and that could create blurry shots. So definitely use a tripod or monopod to get rid of any kind of handshake. Now, here's the interesting thing. When I went out to test this lens, I didn't want to bother with my monopod, pulling it out of the backpack and blah, blah, blah. So I said, you know what, let's see if I can shoot this handheld. And here are the results. Now I'm shooting the CN Tower at 7 kilometers distance, so it's pretty far from me, and this was all handheld. You have to tuck your elbows into your rib cage, hold the lens nice and tight, exhale, focus, shoot, and boom, that's how you do it. But you can shoot this thing handheld without a tripod at 500 millimeters. That's crazy. So definitely set your IBIS to 500 millimeters. Set your shutter speed to over 1,000th of a second. Electronic shutter has to be on, and don't breathe as you shoot. Minimize shake as much as possible, and you can shoot this thing handheld, which is crazy, right? I was pretty shocked by that. All right, let's touch on focusing. This is a completely manual lens. There is no autofocus. Everything has to be done by turning this metal focus ring right here. And it is really well dampened. It takes a little bit of effort to turn it, which I personally do like. I think this is the perfect amount of dampening for a lens at 500 millimeter. When you're focusing it, it has to be intentional, right? You can't accidentally turn it or overfocus it. It takes effort to turn it, and then when you stop, it's there and it's stuck and it doesn't move on you. So I think the focusing ring is perfect. Takes a little bit of getting used to. If you're not used to like focusing manual lenses, it'll take a little bit of time to get used to like moving it in and out. One tip I can give you here is definitely turn on or use the feature on the back of your camera, which is the magnifying glass. So, you know, look through your camera, hit the magnifying glass, find your subject matter, focus on it. And depending on the camera, I mean, with Canon, you have to take a shot, then the next frame is zoomed out, which is a little trick. So focus on what you want to focus on, take the shot to zoom back out, then take your real shot or recompose and take the real shot. But yeah, definitely use the magnifying glass for critical focus, and the focusing ring is nice and tight. All right, so let's talk about optical performance. How does this lens perform for a budget super telephoto lens that's under 500 bucks, that's under 400 bucks? How does it perform? Does it shoot like a potato? Because I've seen some ultra telephoto lenses and the images are just blurry and gross and all that stuff, but this one actually is nice. I'm really surprised by the optical performance of this lens. It's sharp in the center. You don't get too much vignette around the outside. It doesn't lose sharpness around the edges either. If you stop it down to f8, obviously you're gonna get a better depth of field and more sharpness in your images. But even wide open at 6.3, it performs pretty good. The one place I found where this lens kind of, I don't wanna say let me down. I mean, it's a $400 lens, so I can't expect perfection, but the one place where it did struggle is in high contrast situations. Here I'm shooting a man on a boat, and you can see it's sharp when I'm zoomed out, but if you zoom in, you can see there's a lot of chromatic aberration around the high contrast area. So if you're shooting towards bright subject matter with a lot of contrast, sun, that kind of thing, you can expect to see a lot of purple and green fringing. So that's the one flaw with this lens. Other than that, I really haven't noticed anything. It's a really, really nice lens for 400 bananas. All right, so let's talk about who this lens is for. Who would be interested in buying a 500mm lens at this price point? And that's the key thing, this price point. This is an extremely affordable, nice and sharp, versatile lens that you can use. You can throw it in a backpack. I mean, like we talked about, the size isn't that big for a 500mm. So I don't want to say it's a travel lens, but you can definitely throw it in a camera bag and take it with you. You just have to sacrifice some other lenses and things. So if you're into shooting birds, wildlife, animals, maybe even like airplanes, architectural shots, cityscapes at a distance, this lens absolutely awesome. You can even get some really cool landscape photography if you're shooting, you know, a specific scene and you want to isolate a subject matter. If you shoot wide, you get everything, but this will allow you to get that one dead tree on the horizon or close up of that feature or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's a pretty cool lens for that kind of thing. And the other person who would be interested in buying this lens is anybody who's interested in playing around with super telephoto. If you like the look and you're curious and you don't want to spend all that money on a professional lens, then you can pick this up on a budget, experiment, take some shots, and if you fall in love with the look of telephoto, then obviously you can invest in something more expensive. So that's definitely a thing. And if you want to shoot sports with this lens, you have this depth of field calculator here, so you can set your aperture. And of course, you know, people running around playing soccer and whatnot, you're not going to be able to track them because there's no autofocus. So you're going to have to do it the old school way. So you set your depth of field to whatever the case may be, somewhere on the pitch or wherever the case may be. And when the person gets into that depth of field, boom, 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 you take the shots and then they're out again. So you have to be very methodical on how you shoot if you want to use this for sports. All right, so let's talk about user experience here. The experience with this lens, it's been fun so far. I've really liked it. As somebody who shoots wide and mid-range all the time, it was fun to get really long and just like wrapping your head around the idea of shooting super telephoto and looking for compositions that are different and something I'm not used to has been a lot of fun. The lens itself is really easy to use. Aperture, focusing, mounting, I think the design, the build quality, everything is really nice. The only two issues I had was the Arca Swiss plate wasn't machined properly and the mount connecting the lens to the camera on Canon anyway just could be a little bit tighter. Other than that, I think value for money is absolutely fantastic with this lens. It's a lot of fun to use. I look forward to going out there and shooting a little more with it. That's something I definitely want to do when the weather warms up. Right now it's freezing and this lens is all metal. So obviously as you hold it, your hands are going to get cold. I mean, I could always put a rubber band around here to help insulate my fingers from the cold. Anyway, the point is, I really like this lens. I look forward to shooting some more with it. And as mentioned before, I will be taking some more shots with this lens and popping them into the sample gallery on the blog. So definitely check that out for more shots with this lens. And if you're into cool and interesting lenses, check this out. This is the TTartisan's 100mm f2.8 Bubble Bokeh. And what is Bubble Bokeh? This is Bubble Bokeh. So I'll be reviewing this lens in the future. And if you want to learn about Bubble Bokeh and this lens, definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that review video. And in the comments down below, let me know what you think about this lens. Is a 500mm something you're interested in? Would you shoot with a 500mm or on APS-C 800mm? Is that something that gets you excited and something you want to use? Let me know down below. And one thing I didn't get to do for this review video was set up a portrait shoot. I just thought it would be kind of cool to do a portrait shoot with a 500mm, but didn't get around to it before this video came out. So that is something that's in the pipeline and something I will make in the future. So when the weather gets a little warmer, I will definitely go outside and shoot a portrait shoot with this lens because we can't do it in studio at 500mm. That would be crazy to knock out some walls and get some more length. But yeah, anyway, this video is over. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching all the way to the end and subscribe for more videos. Peace out. See you guys in the next video.